We've been talking quite a bit lately about the issue of right to work. In Canada right now, if your employer is unionized, you have no choice. You have to join the union, and you must hand over your dues each and every paycheck, and those dues can be spent on whatever the union bosses want. Quite often, it's on political activity that the members don't necessarily support, but often feel voiceless about. There's a push to change that, especially here in Ontario. There will be more coming at the federal government level eventually. A push to make unions more open is currently underway, all of it being fought by big labor that doesn't want to lose their stranglehold on the workers of Canada. But in the U.S., they've been running an experiment for the last several decades. States are divided into right-to-work states and forced unionism states, which are pretty much like Canada. And we're going to bring on a guest in a moment, but I want to show you one key piece of information: the difference in economic growth. This, in the blue circle, that's the economic growth rate in states with voluntary unionism. Red circle, states with mandatory unionism. Which one has economies growing faster from 2002 to 2011? I think you can see it quite clearly there. We've got more data coming up with our guest, Mark Mix. He is with the National Right to Work Foundation out of Washington, D.C. joins us. Good day, sir.
It's good to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Wanted to ask you quickly about the issue of right to work, because the knock against it from the organized labor is that this is an attempt to push down wages, and that's what is being said about the Ontario push, and I understand Saskatchewan here in Canada is looking at this as well. It's always, they say, about pushing down wages and making everybody work for minimum wage. Is that the experience in the U.S.?
Absolutely not, Brian. In fact, the issue is really quite simple. It's about freedom in the workplace. And if they can stretch it out and say that somehow giving individual workers the right to choose whether or not to join a private organization and whether to financially support it is a wage issue, then I guess they can try to do that. They try to avoid the simple issue of right to work, which is basic individual freedom. And the data, as you mentioned, the experiment that we've been having in the United States over the last couple of decades is beginning to show clearly that freedom works in this case, and right to work works in wages and job growth and economic activity.
Now, it's not as if in states where it's right-to-work states, where workers are free to join or not join the union, it's not as if unions have disappeared completely from those states. Is that the case?
That's exactly right, Brian. In fact, what we find is that union officials are much more accountable to rank-and-file workers in right-to-work states because they have to, quote, surprise of surprises, actually represent the worker in the bargaining unit. They've got to provide a service that the workers decide is acceptable and that they want to purchase, if you will. And so the market system, the competitive market system, is in play in these workplaces. So, for example, in the right-to-work state of Alabama, the union density there is higher than many states that don't have right-to-work laws. Nevada, another state, of course, the gambling industry is a big leader there and a job driver, but the union density in the right-to-work state of Nevada is higher than states that don't have right-to-work laws. So union officials would claim that, but the evidence is not true, and frankly, they don't want to be held accountable in the workplace. They just want the money.
My late grandfather was a union man his whole life, and my father was as well. My late grandfather was a union steward and so on, and he always said, look, you're going to get the union you deserve, and if you're a good employer, you'll either have no union or a weak union, and if you're a bad employer, you're going to get a really tough union. This sounds like it's the right to work flips that on its head and says, if you give workers choice, the union improves and becomes a better servant of their members.
I think that's right, Brian, and your grandfather was a wise man. And certainly, you know, in areas where there is abuse, there is certainly a right protected by federal law for workers to join together voluntarily, to bargain collectively for mutual assistance. That's Chapter 7 of our labor code here in the United States. And so if an employer is mistreating his workers, he probably deserves to have his workers to organize. But the fact is, employers understand, and most enlightened union officials should understand, that it's not a zero-sum game between labor and management, although union bosses like like that rhetoric. They like the, somehow if management wins, the workers lose. Well, frankly, that's just, that's ridiculous, because we know that employers really can't survive and they can't get a return on their investment if they're making their employees and not providing an environment where their employees can increase productivity, increase efficiency, and can work in an environment they enjoy. The fact of the matter is that workers and management working together is the way it goes. And nothing in the law in the United States, and hopefully when Canada gets their labor law right and provides individual freedom, they'll recognize the importance of workers joining together voluntarily, but they'll never use compulsion as a vehicle for organizing employees into collectives, and they won't look at the relationship as a zero-sum game between two parties that are always at loggerheads with each other. That's just not the way it works.
I can tell you, I've been a member of some unions that were absolutely useless, and I've had the option, I would have stopped because they actually did nothing for you. I want to you brought some stats with you, and I want to bring them to people right now. This is from the National Institute for Labor Relations Research. Percentage of real growth in private sector employee compensation. Right-to-work states, it's up 11.3%, 2000 to 2010. Forced union states, 0.7%, it's up. Cost of living compensation, you can see over $1,000 difference between right-to-work states. They get $1,000 more than forced union. Real growth in number of residents, so people are voting with their feet. Forced union states going down, right-to-work states growing just over 9%, and welfare recipients per 1,000 residents. This is interesting, 7.7 versus 18.2. So it really does appear to be beneficial for everybody, and if the goal is, and as you point out, it was Alabama that has higher unionization rates than other states. If it's going to help everyone's in the economy and open things up, make it more flexible workforce, why would the union bosses be against this?
Well, Brian, it's a great business model if you can get it. For 75 plus years here in the United States, union officials have been able to tell a worker, you pay us for the privilege of working. And what that means is, by government decree, they have this power over individual workers, and frankly, they don't have to provide services. They don't have to be accountable. They don't have to be providing a good product to workers. They simply get the money as a function of their power and privilege under federal statute. And so the fact is that if you can get the business model that says, hey, everyone's got to pay me for the privilege of working, it works. But the idea is just an anathema to both individual freedom and, frankly, as Samuel Gompers, the founder of the AFL in America back at the turn of the 1800s, 1900s, he said the workers of America adhere to voluntary institutions and anything else is a menace to their rights. And what he was saying to the union members then and the delegates to the union conventions was, if you're going to rely on government for your power, you're going to destroy the union movement. And look what's happened in America. They rely on government for their power. They're down to under 7% of the private sector workforce. The only sector where they actually have any good news is the government sector. But as the lead-in to this, as I heard before we went on the air, that's a problem not only for the United States, but certainly for Canada as well. As government grows and outgrows the private sector, it just can't work. And frankly, their business model here in the public sector is not working. Evidence of Wisconsin just a short month ago.
All right, Mark Mix, thank you very much.